The morning mist clung to the valley like a shroud, weaving through the modest wooden cottages that made up the Omega village of Silverpine. Aria knelt by the creek, her fingers numb from the frigid water as she scrubbed the last of the linens against the smooth river stones. The fabric twisted in her grip, releasing clouds of soap that drifted downstream, disappearing into the current like forgotten dreams. She had been awake since before dawn, as she was every day. Sleep was a luxury Omegas in Silverpine could rarely afford. The village operated on a strict hierarchy, and those at the bottom worked the hardest to earn their place at the communal table each night. "Aria, the elders are calling for assembly." The voice belonged to Maya, a younger Omega who lived 3 cottages down from Aria's small dwelling. The girl's face was flushed. Whether from running or excitement, Aria couldn't tell. Assembly calls were rare, perhaps twice a year at most, and they always meant change was coming. Aria stood, wiping her wet hands on her worn apron. "Do you know what it's about?" Maya shook her head, dark curls bouncing around her shoulders. "No one will say, but there are strangers in the village. Beta wolves from the capital. They arrived at sunrise with the Alpha King's seal. The Alpha King. Even his title sent a chill down Aria's spine. In the 5 years since King Damien had taken the throne, stories had spread throughout the kingdom like wildfire. Some called him a visionary leader who had brought prosperity to the central territories. Others whispered darker tales of his cold heart, his terrible temper, and the mysterious curse that plagued his bloodline. "We should go," Aria said, hanging the wet linens over the nearby fence. They would have to dry there, unattended. The elders didn't tolerate lateness. The 2 Omega women made their way through the village toward the central square. Other Omegas emerged from their homes, faces etched with curiosity and concern. The social structure of their world was absolute. Alphas ruled with strength and dominance. Betas served as the backbone of society with their stability and loyalty, and Omegas, rare and often undervalued, occupied the lowest rung, viewed as weak, despite the ancient legends that spoke of their hidden powers. Aria had never put much stock in legends. Her reality was this village, these people, and the daily struggle to survive. The square was already crowded when they arrived. Elder Rothgar stood on the raised platform, his gray beard reaching his chest, his eyes serious beneath heavy brows. Beside him stood 2 beta wolves in pristine uniforms bearing the royal crest, a silver wolf beneath a crescent moon. "Omegas of Silverpine," Elder Rothgar began, his voice carrying across the silent crowd. "Today we have received a decree from the Alpha King himself. The royal court has issued a summons." Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Summons from the capital were unheard of. Silverpine was a forgotten corner of the kingdom, too small and too poor to warrant royal attention. One of the beta officials stepped forward, unrolling a scroll sealed with red wax. His voice was crisp and formal as he read, "By order of His Majesty, King Damien of the Shadowcrest dynasty, sovereign of the Northern Territories and Alpha of Alphas, a selection is to be made from all Omega settlements within the kingdom. Each village shall present their finest unmated Omega to the royal court within the fortnight. This decree is absolute and carries the full weight of royal law." The murmurs became gasps, then frantic whispers. Aria felt her heart sink. Present their finest Omega? For what purpose? "What does the king want with an Omega?" someone called out from the crowd. The beta official's expression remained neutral. "The purpose is the king's own. Your duty is simply to comply. The selected Omega will be escorted to the capital and presented to His Majesty. It is a great honor to serve your king. Honor." The word felt hollow. Aria had heard enough stories about what happened to Omegas who caught the attention of powerful Alphas. They were rarely stories with happy endings. Elder Rothgar cleared his throat. "The council will convene immediately to make the selection. All unmated Omegas between the ages of 18 and 25 are to remain in the square. The rest of you are dismissed." Aria's stomach twisted. She was 22, unmated, and by the village's standards she supposed she was presentable enough. But surely there were better choices. Prettier Omegas, ones with softer temperaments who hadn't spent years building calluses from hard labor. As the crowd dispersed, Aria found herself among 24 other Omegas, all wearing varying expressions of fear and uncertainty. Maya stood beside her, gripping her hand tightly. They won't choose you, Maya whispered. You're too what? Aria asked. Too spirited, too independent. They'll want someone docile. Aria hoped her friend was right. She had no desire to leave Silverpine, despite its hardships. This was her home. These were her people. The elders formed a circle, speaking in hushed tones while the Beta officials observed with military precision. Aria could see Elder Hrothgar gesturing, his weathered hands moving emphatically as he spoke with the other council members. Elder Yara, the only female on the council, kept glancing toward the group of Omegas, her expression unreadable. Minutes stretched into an hour. The sun climbed higher, burning away the morning mist. Aria's legs ached from standing, but she didn't dare sit. Around her, other Omegas shifted nervously, some weeping quietly, others standing with resigned acceptance. Finally, Elder Hrothgar returned to the platform. His eyes found Aria's, and in that moment, she knew. Aria Moonwhisper, he called out. Step forward. Time seemed to slow. Every eye in the square turned to her. Maya's hand slipped from hers as Aria forced her feet to move, one step after another, until she stood at the base of the platform, looking up at the elders who had just decided her fate. You have been selected to represent Silverpine before the Alpha King, Elder Hrothgar announced. You will prepare to leave at first light tomorrow. May the moon goddess watch over you. The words sounded final, like a door slamming shut on her old life. Why me? Aria heard herself ask, her voice steadier than she felt. Elder Yara stepped forward. Because you are strong, Aria, stronger than you know, and because you have the spirit to survive whatever awaits you at the capital. Survive, not thrive, not flourish. Survive. The Beta officials approached her, their boots echoing on the wooden planks. The taller of the two, with sharp features and cold blue eyes, looked her up and down appraisingly. She'll do, he said curtly. See that she's properly prepared. The king has specific requirements. That last word hung in the air like a threat. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Aria was whisked away to the elders' hall, where she was bathed, her hair washed and combed until it shone like spun gold in the afternoon light. The village women brought what few nice garments they could spare, a simple dress in deep blue, hand-stitched with silver thread along the hem. It was the finest thing Aria had ever worn, and yet it felt like a costume for a role she never auditioned for. Maya helped her pack the small bag she would be allowed to bring, a change of clothes, a comb, the small wooden wolf her father had carved for her before he died when she was 10. It wasn't much, but it was all she had of her former life. I'll take care of your cottage, Maya promised, tears streaming down her cheeks. And when you come back, if I come back, Aria corrected gently. When? Maya insisted fiercely. When you come back, everything will be waiting for you. That night, Aria couldn't sleep. She sat by her window, watching the stars wheel overhead, the same stars that shone over the capital, over the Alpha King's palace. What did he look like? Was he as fearsome as the stories claimed? And what did he want with a village Omega like her? The questions chased themselves in circles through her mind until dawn began to break. True to their word, the Beta officials appeared at her door just as the first rays of sunlight touched the valley. They gave her no time for prolonged goodbyes. Maya hugged her fiercely, whispering prayers to the moon goddess for her protection. Elder Yara pressed a small vial into her hand. Wolfsbane tincture, the old woman murmured. Just a few drops will make even the strongest alpha drowsy. Use it only if you must. Aria tucked the vial into her bodice, understanding the dark implication. It was both a gift and a warning. The journey began. They traveled in a covered wagon, Aria seated between the two Beta officials who had delivered the decree. Neither spoke to her beyond curt instructions. The landscape changed as they moved east, from the familiar forests and hills of her home to broader plains, then to cultivated farmland that spoke of wealth and organization. On the second day, they passed through a larger town. Aria peered through the wagon's opening, watching common wolves go about their business, merchants hawking wares, children playing in the streets, Alpha and Beta wolves moving with the confidence of those who belonged. No Omegas were visible, at least not openly. She wondered if they were hidden away, as Omegas often were in larger settlements, kept separate from the general population for their own protection. "Where are we?" she asked. "Ironbrook," the blue-eyed Beta answered. "We'll rest here for the night, then continue to the capital tomorrow. We should arrive by evening." A tavern had been arranged for them. Aria was given a small room on the second floor, barely large enough for a bed and washstand. A guard was posted outside her door. Not to protect her, she realized, but to ensure she didn't run. Not that she would. Where would she go? She had no money, no connections, and running from a royal decree was punishable by death, not just for her, but potentially for her entire village. She was trapped, and everyone knew it. That night, she dreamed of wolves, great beasts with eyes like molten gold, circling her in a moonlit clearing. One wolf stood apart from the rest, larger than the others, its fur black as midnight. When it looked at her, she felt a jolt of recognition so powerful she woke with a gasp. The morning brought her final day of freedom. As they approached the capital, Aria's breath caught. She had never seen anything like it. The city of Shadowcrest sprawled across the landscape like a living creature, its buildings rising in tiers toward the massive palace that crowned the highest hill. Towers and spires pierced the sky, and even from a distance, she could see the glint of silver and stone. The palace itself was magnificent and terrifying. Built from dark granite with veins of silver running through the stone, it looked more like a fortress than a home. High walls surrounded it, and guards in royal livery stood at every gate. The wagon passed through 3 checkpoints before finally entering the palace grounds. Gardens spread in every direction, maintained with obvious care, but there was something austere about them, beautiful, but cold, like everything else about this place. "Out," the blue-eyed Beta commanded. Aria climbed down on shaking legs. Before her stood the palace entrance, massive doors carved with scenes of wolves hunting beneath the moon. Other wagons were arriving from different directions. She caught glimpses of other young women, other Omegas, she realized, all being escorted into the palace. How many villages had received the decree? How many Omegas had been selected? They were herded through corridors of polished stone, their footsteps echoing. Aria tried to memorize the route, but quickly became lost in the maze of hallways. Finally, they arrived at a large chamber where at least 30 other Omegas were already gathered. A stern-looking Beta woman in elegant robes stood at the front. Her silver hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her eyes were sharp as glass. "Listen carefully," she began without preamble. "You have been brought here for a singular purpose. The Alpha King requires an Omega. Only one of you will be chosen. The rest will be sent home." A collective exhale of relief swept through the room. Sent home. There was still hope. "However," the woman continued, and the relief died. "The selection process will take several days. You will be evaluated on appearance, temperament, obedience, and certain other qualities. You will follow all instructions without question. Failure to comply will result in immediate dismissal and disgrace for your village. Do you understand?" "Yes, ma'am," came the chorus of voices, Aria's among them. "Good. You will be taken to your quarters, where you will bathe and change into proper attire. Meals will be brought to you. You are not to leave your rooms without escort. The first evaluation begins at sunset." They were divided into groups and led away. Aria found herself in a corridor with 5 other Omegas, all looking as frightened as she felt. Their assigned rooms were small but comfortable, far nicer than anything Aria had known in Silverpine. A bath had been prepared, steaming and scented with herbs. On the bed lay a gown in deep crimson, the fabric so fine it seemed to shimmer in the candlelight. She bathed quickly, washing away the dust of travel, then dressed in the crimson gown. It fit perfectly, which somehow made her more uneasy. Had they known her measurements? Had someone been watching her in the village? A knock came at the door. "It's time," a voice called. Aria took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and opened the door. The evaluation chamber was vast, lit by hundreds of candles. The Omegas were arranged in a line, and before them sat a panel of officials, Betas and a few stern Alphas, all regarding them with cold appraisal. They were asked questions, made to walk, to speak, to demonstrate grace and composure. Through it all, Aria felt like livestock being inspected for purchase. Hours passed. Some Omegas were dismissed immediately, sent from the room in tears. Others were asked to remain. Aria answered questions about her village, her skills, her lineage. She walked when told to walk, turned when told to turn, endured hands measuring her shoulders, her height, examining her teeth like she was a horse. Finally, as midnight approached, only 12 Omegas remained, Aria among them. "You will spend the night here," the silver-haired beta woman announced. "Tomorrow, you will meet the Alpha King. He will make the final choice. Pray that you are worthy." Back in her room, Aria sat on the edge of the bed, her mind racing. Tomorrow she would meet him, the Alpha King, the one the entire kingdom feared and respected in equal measure. Would he choose her? Part of her hoped desperately that he wouldn't, that she could return to Silverpine and resume her simple life. But another part of her, a part she barely acknowledged, felt a strange pull. That dream of the black wolf flashed through her mind again, those golden eyes. She shook her head. She was being foolish. Tomorrow would come soon enough, and with it, whatever fate the moon goddess had planned for her. Aria lay back on the soft bed, so different from her straw mattress at home, and closed her eyes. Sleep was long in coming, but eventually, exhaustion claimed her. Her last thought before darkness took her was a whisper in her mind, a voice she didn't recognize but somehow knew. Tomorrow, everything changes. Dawn broke over the palace of Shadowcrest with reluctant light, as if even the sun hesitated to illuminate what lay within those stone walls. Aria woke to the sound of bells, deep, resonant tones that seemed to vibrate through the very foundations of the building. She sat up in the unfamiliar bed, disoriented for a moment before the reality of her situation came crashing back. She was in the Alpha King's palace. Today, she would meet him. A servant entered without knocking, a young beta woman with downcast eyes who carried a breakfast tray. She set it on the small table by the window without speaking, then gestured for Aria to eat. "Thank you," Aria said softly, but the servant had already turned to leave. "Wait, please. Can you tell me what happens today?" The servant paused, glancing nervously at the door as if afraid of being overheard. "The remaining candidates will be presented to His Majesty at noon. You should eat and prepare yourself. The attendants will come to help you dress in an hour." "What is he like?" Aria asked quickly, before the woman could escape. "The Alpha King?" Something flickered in the servant's eyes. Was it fear? Pity? "That is not for me to say, miss. But—" She hesitated, then added in a whisper, "Pray that you are not chosen, or pray that you are. I cannot decide which would be the greater mercy." With that cryptic statement, she hurried from the room, leaving Aria more unsettled than before. The breakfast consisted of fresh bread, honey, fruits Aria had never seen before, and a rich tea that warmed her from within. She ate mechanically, her appetite dulled by anxiety. Through the window she could see the palace grounds stretching below, gardens that should have been beautiful but felt somehow mournful, as if the very plants grieved for something lost. True to the servant's word, attendants arrived precisely an hour later. There were 3 of them, all beta women who worked with efficient silence. They drew another bath, this one perfumed with oils that smelled of night-blooming flowers. They washed her hair with careful attention, combing it until it fell in golden waves down her back. The gown they brought was unlike anything Aria had ever imagined. Made of silk the color of moonlight, it seemed to shimmer with its own luminescence. The bodice was fitted, the skirt flowing, and delicate silver embroidery traced patterns along the hem and sleeves. Patterns that, Aria realized with a start, depicted wolves running beneath stars. Is this what all the candidates are wearing?" she asked. One of the attendants, slightly older than the others, shook her head. "Each gown is different. Yours was selected specifically for you." "By whom?" "By the king's advisors. They observe everything." The thought that she had been watched, studied, assessed without her knowledge sent a chill down her spine. How long had they been observing? Since she arrived, or longer? As the attendants worked, Aria caught fragments of their whispered conversation when they thought she wasn't paying attention. 3rd selection in as many years. None of the others lasted more than a month. The curse grows stronger. Aria's ears perked up. "What curse?" she asked directly. The attendants fell silent immediately, exchanging nervous glances. The older one finally spoke. "We are not permitted to discuss such matters. You will learn what you need to know when the time comes." But Aria had already learned something important. Whatever was happening here, she was not the first Omega to be brought to the palace. There had been others, and apparently, they had not stayed. What had happened to them? Had they been sent home? Or, she didn't want to complete that thought. When the attendants finished, they stepped back to admire their work. Aria barely recognized herself in the polished mirror they provided. She looked like a princess from the old stories her mother used to tell, ethereal and otherworldly. But beneath the finery, she was still just Aria from Silverpine, a girl who had scrubbed laundry in cold streams and never imagined she would stand in a palace. "It is time," the older attendant announced. "Follow us." They led her through corridors she hadn't seen before. The palace was a labyrinth of stone and shadow, with torches burning in iron sconces even during daylight hours. The walls were decorated with tapestries depicting the kingdom's history, great battles, coronations, treaties signed beneath full moons. In many of them, Aria noticed a recurring symbol, a black wolf standing alone, separated from its pack. They passed other candidates being escorted by their own attendants. Aria counted 11 others, so 12 had survived the first evaluation. Some looked terrified, others resigned, and a few wore expressions of calculated ambition. One girl, with striking red hair and sharp green eyes, caught Aria's gaze and smiled coldly, as if already measuring her as competition. The throne room was massive, its ceiling soaring so high that the top disappeared into shadow. Columns of dark granite lined the sides, and the floor was polished black marble that reflected the torchlight like still water. At the far end of the hall, elevated on a dais of 3 steps, stood the throne itself, carved from a single piece of silver-veined stone, its back shaped like a wolf's head howling at an invisible moon. The throne was empty. The 12 Omegas were arranged in a semicircle before the dais. Palace officials, beta advisors, and what appeared to be high-ranking alphas from noble houses filled the sides of the room. The air hummed with tension and barely suppressed whispers. A herald stepped forward, his voice booming through the chamber. "You stand in the presence of the throne of Shadowcrest. When His Majesty enters, you will bow and remain bowed until given permission to rise. You will speak only when spoken to. You will show the proper respect due to your king and Alpha. Any failure to observe protocol will result in immediate dismissal." Aria's heart hammered against her ribs. She clasped her hands together to stop them from shaking. Minutes passed. The silence grew oppressive. Just when Aria thought she might scream from the tension, a door behind the throne opened. The change in the room was immediate. Every person present seemed to hold their breath. The very air felt charged, electric, as if lightning were about to strike. He entered. Alpha King Damien was not what Aria expected. She had imagined someone older, perhaps scarred and brutal-looking, matching the fearsome reputation that preceded him. Instead, the man who walked to the throne moved with a predator's grace, appearing to be in his late 20s or early 30s. He was tall and powerfully built, his frame speaking of strength barely contained. He wore black from head to toe, a fitted jacket over a crisp shirt, trousers that emphasized his long legs, boots that barely made a sound despite the marble floor. But it was his face that captured her attention. Strong features, sharp cheekbones, a jaw that could have been carved from stone. His hair was dark as midnight, falling slightly across his forehead, and his eyes. Even from a distance, Aria could see they were an unusual color, amber shot through with gold, like flames frozen in time. They swept across the assembled Omegas with an expression that was utterly unreadable. He radiated power. It rolled off him in waves, an alpha presence so strong that Aria felt her Omega instincts screaming at her to submit, to lower her eyes, to make herself small and unthreatening. Around her, she sensed the other candidates already trembling, some swaying as if physically pushed by the weight of his dominance. "Bow," the herald commanded unnecessarily. Everyone was already bowing, including Aria, though she fought to keep her head up just enough to watch him through her lowered lashes. The Alpha King settled into his throne with casual authority, one hand resting on the arm, the other loosely fisted. He studied them in silence, And Aria had the disturbing sense that he was looking not just at their outward appearance, but somehow deeper, seeing things they didn't even know about themselves. "Rise," he said finally. His voice was deep, resonant, carrying easily through the vast space without needing to shout. They rose, though several candidates looked ready to faint. "You have been brought here because your villages deemed you worthy of consideration," the king continued. "I will speak with each of you briefly. Answer my questions truthfully. That is all I require." He gestured to his advisors, and they began calling names. One by one, the candidates approached the throne. Aria couldn't hear what was said during these private exchanges, but she watched carefully. Some conversations lasted only moments before the candidate was dismissed. Others went longer. The red-haired girl spoke with the king for several minutes, her posture confident, almost flirtatious. When she returned to her place, she looked satisfied. Aria Moonwhisper of Silverpine. Her name echoed through the chamber. Aria's legs felt like water as she forced herself to walk forward. The distance to the throne seemed infinite, yet she crossed it far too quickly. Up close, the Alpha King was even more imposing. The power emanating from him was nearly overwhelming. She stopped at the base of the dais and bowed again, deeper this time. "Look at me." It was a command, not a request. Aria raised her eyes to meet his, and the world seemed to tilt. Those amber gold eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that stole her breath. For a moment, she could have sworn she saw something flicker in their depths. Surprise? Recognition? But it was gone so quickly she thought she must have imagined it. "Your village is small," he said. "Remote. Why do you think they chose you?" "I don't know, Your Majesty," Aria answered honestly. "Perhaps because I am resilient." Resilient. He seemed to taste the word. An interesting choice. Most would say obedient, or skilled, or beautiful, but you choose resilient. "The others may be true as well, Your Majesty, but resilience is what has kept me alive." Something that might have been the ghost of a smile touched his lips. "You come from poverty." It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. "Yes. Yet you hold yourself with dignity. You do not cower, even in the presence of an alpha far above your station." Was this a test? Was he looking for submission or strength? Aria chose honesty. "I know my place, Your Majesty, but I also know that dignity is not determined by station. It is determined by character." Now she had definitely surprised him. His eyes narrowed slightly, studying her with renewed interest. "Bold words from an Omega. True words, I hope, Your Majesty. Do you know why you are here? The real reason?" Aria hesitated. "I know what I have been told, that you require an Omega, but I suspect there is more to it than that." "Indeed." He leaned forward slightly, his gaze never leaving hers. "Tell me, Aria Moonwhisper, do you believe in curses?" The question caught her off guard. I believe that legends often have roots in truth, Your Majesty." A diplomatic answer. "But I asked what you believe." She took a breath. "I believe that sometimes we call things curses when we don't understand them. And I believe that understanding is the first step to overcoming any obstacle." For a long moment, he said nothing, just watched her with those unsettling eyes. Then he sat back. "You may return to your place." Aria bowed and retreated, her heart pounding so hard she was certain everyone could hear it. What had just happened? Had she passed whatever test that was, or failed spectacularly? The remaining candidates were interviewed. When the last one finished, the Alpha King rose from his throne. Every person in the room tensed. "I will make my decision tonight," he announced. "The chosen Omega will be informed privately. The rest will be returned to their villages with my gratitude for their service. You are dismissed." The attendants appeared immediately to escort them back to their rooms. Aria walked in a daze, replaying every word of her brief exchange with the king. She had expected a monster, or at least someone cold and cruel. Instead, she had found something far more complicated, a man of obvious power and intelligence, but also one who carried shadows in his eyes. What burdens did an Alpha King bear that would create such darkness? Back in her room, Aria was left alone with her thoughts. Hours passed. Lunch was brought, but she barely touched it. Through the window, she watched the sun arc across the sky, painting the gardens in gold and amber. She wondered what the other candidates were doing. Were they hoping to be chosen, or praying to be passed over? As evening approached, Aria noticed something strange. The servants who passed in the hallway outside her room moved with unusual haste, speaking in urgent whispers. Something was happening, some disturbance in the palace's routine. Then she heard it. A sound like distant thunder, except it came from within the palace itself. The floor trembled slightly beneath her feet. Shouts echoed from somewhere below, followed by the sound of running footsteps. Aria went to her door and opened it cautiously. The hallway was empty, but she could hear commotion from deeper in the palace. Against her better judgment, she stepped out. If something dangerous was happening, she wanted to know what it was. She followed the sounds, moving through corridors that grew progressively darker and colder. The architecture here was older, more austere. This was a part of the palace that predated the current structures, she realized. Ancient foundations upon which the modern palace had been built. Voices grew louder ahead. Aria pressed herself against the wall near a corner, peering around carefully. A group of advisors stood in the hallway, their faces grave. Among them she recognized the silver-haired beta woman who had overseen the evaluations. "Getting worse," one of the advisors was saying. "The episodes are more frequent, more violent. We cannot continue this way. The Omega must be chosen tonight," another insisted. "We cannot delay any longer. The next full moon is in 3 days. And if none of them are suitable?" the silver-haired woman asked. "What then? Then we search again. But we are running out of time. The curse will not wait." "Has he said anything about which one he favors?" "The king keeps his own counsel, as always. But he spent the longest time with the one from Silverpine. Aria something." Aria's breath caught. They were talking about her. "The Omega from that backwater village?" One of the advisors sounded skeptical. "Surely one of the more refined candidates would be better suited." "Refinement is not what is needed," the silver-haired woman interrupted. "The prophecy speaks of strength hidden in weakness, power concealed in humility. An Omega from the lowest station might be exactly what is required. If the prophecy is even real, for all we know, we are chasing shadows while the king suffers. The prophecy is real. The late queen herself confirmed it before she died. An Omega will either be his salvation or his doom. We can only pray we choose correctly." Another tremor shook the floor, stronger this time. The advisors exchanged worried looks. "It is happening again," someone said unnecessarily. "We should go. The king will need us." They hurried off down the corridor, leaving Aria alone in the shadows, her mind reeling. A curse. A prophecy. The king was suffering from something that caused these tremors. And somehow, an Omega, possibly her, was connected to either saving him or destroying him. She should return to her room before she was discovered where she shouldn't be. But curiosity and something else, a strange pull she couldn't name, drove her forward. She followed the corridor the advisors had taken, moving quietly, staying in the shadows. The passage ended at a massive door, ornately carved but currently standing open. Beyond it, Aria could see a chamber lit by hundreds of candles. And in the center of that chamber, she saw him. The Alpha King stood with his back to the door, his shoulders rigid with tension. As Aria watched, his entire body convulsed, and he fell to one knee. The temperature in the corridor plummeted. Frost began spreading across the stone walls with unnatural speed. One of the advisors approached him cautiously. "Your Majesty, you must rest. Let us help you to your chambers." "No." The king's voice was ragged, barely recognizable. "Leave me. All of you, leave now." The command in his voice was absolute. The advisors retreated, backing out of the chamber. Aria pressed herself into an alcove, praying they wouldn't see her as they passed. Miraculously, they were too focused on their own concerns to notice her presence. When they had gone, Aria looked back into the chamber. The king was alone now, still on one knee, his hands fisted against the stone floor. She saw his shoulders heaving as if each breath was a battle. She should leave. She should run back to her room and pretend she had seen nothing. But something held her in place. That same inexplicable pull she had felt earlier. The king's head lifted slightly, and Aria's heart stopped. For a moment, she could swear his eyes glowed with an unnatural light. Not amber gold anymore, but pure silver, like moonlight given form. "I know you are there," he said quietly, his voice carrying despite its low volume. Come out. Aria froze. How had he known? She hadn't made a sound. I said come out, Omega. I can sense you. Slowly, knowing she had no choice, Aria stepped from the alcove into the doorway. The king's eyes found her immediately. They were returning to their normal color now, but something wild still lurked in their depths. You should not be here, he said, but there was no anger in his voice, only weariness. I'm sorry, Your Majesty. I heard the commotion and I shouldn't have come. I'll go. No. He pushed himself to his feet with visible effort. Since you are here, and since you have already seen this, you may as well know the truth. Come closer. Every instinct screamed at Aria to run, but she found herself obeying, stepping into the chamber. Up close, she could see the toll whatever had happened had taken on him. His face was pale, a sheen of perspiration on his brow, his hands trembling slightly before he clenched them into fists. Do you know what you witnessed? He asked. No, Your Majesty. He laughed, but it was a bitter sound. Of course not. How could you? Very few people know the full truth. He turned away from her, moving to a window that overlooked the darkening grounds. My family line is cursed, Aria Moonwhisper. Has been for 3 generations. My grandfather died from it. My father barely survived long enough to see me crowned. And now it is my turn. What kind of curse? The kind that slowly destroys you from within. It is connected to our wolf nature, to the very thing that makes us alpha. The stronger the alpha, the stronger the curse. And he looked down at his hands. I am very strong. Is that why you need an omega? Aria asked quietly. He turned back to her, and for the first time, she saw genuine vulnerability in his eyes. The court prophecy says that only an omega can break the curse, but it must be the right omega, one who possesses certain qualities. That is why there have been selections before. 3 times we have tried. 3 times we have failed. What happened to the others? The omegas who came before me? They were sent home, unharmed but changed. The curse affects those who get too close to me, not fatally, but enough to know they were not the one. Aria processed this. And you think one of us, one of the candidates here now, might be the one? I hope so. Because if not, he didn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. The implication was clear. How will you know? Which one is right? The prophecy speaks of signs, a connection that transcends normal bonds, a strength of spirit that can withstand the curse's influence. And he hesitated, then continued. A recognition. The moment I saw you today in the throne room, I felt something. I do not know if it means you are the one, or if I am simply desperate enough to grasp at shadows. Aria's mind was spinning. This powerful alpha, this king who commanded an entire kingdom, was confessing his vulnerability to her, a lowly omega from a forgotten village. Why? Your Majesty, I don't understand. Why are you telling me this? He moved closer, and Aria had to fight the urge to step back. Not from fear, but from the intensity of his presence. Because you asked the right questions today. Because you spoke of understanding before overcoming. Because when I looked into your eyes, I saw something I have not seen in a very long time. Hope. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. And because tomorrow, I am going to choose you. The question is, will you accept? The world seemed to hold its breath. Aria stared at him, at this Alpha King who carried a curse, who had just laid his greatest vulnerability before her. She started, then stopped. What could she say? That she was terrified? That she had no idea if she possessed whatever qualities he needed? That the sensible thing would be to refuse? But instead, she heard herself say, If I can help you, Your Majesty, if there is even a chance I can break this curse, then yes, I will accept. Something shifted in his expression. Relief? Gratitude? She couldn't be sure. You may regret that decision, Aria Moonwhisper. Perhaps, she acknowledged. But I would regret not trying even more. For the first time since she had met him, the Alpha King truly smiled. It transformed his face, making him look younger, less burdened. Then it is settled. Tomorrow, you will be announced as my chosen Omega, and may the moon goddess have mercy on us both. Sleep did not come easily that night. Aria lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling as moonlight filtered through the window, casting silver patterns across the walls. Her conversation with the Alpha King played on an endless loop in her mind. She had agreed to something she barely understood, committed herself to a fate that could mean salvation or destruction, not just for herself, but for the king and possibly the entire kingdom. What had she been thinking? But even as doubt gnawed at her, she knew she would make the same choice again. There had been something in his eyes, a desperate hope mixed with resignation, that had spoken to something deep within her. He was not the monster she had expected. He was a man carrying an impossible burden, and somehow, impossibly, she might be able to help. Dawn arrived too quickly. Aria rose and dressed in the simple day gown the servants had left for her. She was braiding her hair when the knock came at her door. "Enter," she called, expecting a servant. Instead, the silver-haired beta woman from the evaluations stepped inside. Her expression was unreadable as she studied Aria with sharp, assessing eyes. "I am Magistrate Lydia," the woman said formally. "I oversee the palace household and serve as advisor to His Majesty. You are to come with me." "Has the king made his announcement?" Aria asked, though she already knew the answer. "He has. The other candidates are being prepared for their journey home as we speak. You, however, have a different path ahead." Lydia's tone was neutral, but something flickered in her eyes. Concern? Warning? "Follow me. There is much you need to understand before tonight." "Tonight?" Aria's stomach tightened. "The bonding ceremony will take place at moonrise. There is no time to waste. The full moon is only 2 days away, and the king's condition worsens with each passing day." They walked through corridors Aria was beginning to recognize. Though the palace was so vast, she doubted she would ever know all its secrets. Lydia led her to a part of the palace that seemed dedicated to administrative functions, offices and meeting rooms rather than residential quarters. They entered a chamber lined with books and scrolls. A large table dominated the center, and on it lay an ancient tome, its pages yellowed with age. Lydia gestured for Aria to sit. "What you are about to learn is known to very few," Lydia began, settling into the chair across from her. "The curse that afflicts the royal bloodline is not simply a family illness. It is a punishment, enacted 3 generations ago by a powerful witch whom the king's grandfather wronged." Aria leaned forward, listening intently. "The curse is tied to the alpha nature itself. It feeds on dominance, on power, on the very traits that make a strong alpha. The more powerful the wolf, the more the curse consumes them. King Damien is the strongest alpha born to his line in a century, which means the curse affects him more severely than it did his father or grandfather." "But the prophecy?" Aria started. "Yes. Before the witch died, she left one possibility of redemption, an Omega, and it must be an Omega specifically, can break the curse, but only if certain conditions are met. The Omega must possess inner strength that matches the Alpha's outer power. They must bond willingly, not through force or coercion. And..." Lydia paused, her expression grave. "The Omega must be willing to share the burden of the curse until it is broken." "Share the burden?" Aria's voice was barely a whisper. "What does that mean?" "It means that once you bond with the king, the curse will affect you as well. Not as severely. Omegas are naturally resistant to such dark forces, but you will feel its influence. Pain, weakness, visions perhaps. And if you are not the prophesied one, if the bond is not strong enough to break the curse," Lydia met her eyes directly, "you could be consumed by it, just as he will be." The room seemed to spin. Aria gripped the edge of the table. "Why didn't he tell me this last night?" "Because he hoped I would. His Majesty. He is not accustomed to asking for help, especially not in ways that might harm others. He would have let you make the choice in ignorance rather than see you walk knowingly into danger. But you're telling me, because you deserve to know what you're facing, and because I suspect you are stronger than you appear," Aria Moonwhisper. "Your village elders chose you for a reason. They saw something in you that made them believe you could survive whatever awaited you here." Aria thought of Elder Yara's words. "Because you are strong, Aria. Stronger than you know." At the time, she had thought it mere comfort. Now she wondered if the old woman had known more than she let on. "If I refuse now," Aria began. "You can refuse. His Majesty gave explicit instructions that you were to be told everything and given a choice. If you wish to return to your village, you will be escorted safely home with generous compensation for your time. Lydia's expression softened slightly. No one would blame you. This is an enormous risk. Aria looked down at her hands, calloused from years of hard work. These hands had scrubbed clothes until they bled, had carried water from the creek in winter, had held together a life that should have broken her long ago. She had survived poverty, loss, loneliness. Could she survive this? More importantly, could she live with herself if she didn't try? When is the ceremony? She asked quietly. Lydia's lips curved in the faintest smile. Moonrise. We have much to prepare. The rest of the day passed in a blur of activity. Aria was bathed again, this time with water infused with herbs that Lydia said would strengthen her natural resistances. Her hair was arranged in an intricate style, woven with silver threads that caught the light. The gown they brought her was breathtaking, white as snow, flowing like water, with patterns embroidered in silver thread that depicted wolves and moons in an endless dance. In the old tradition, Lydia explained as servants worked around them, an Omega bonding with an Alpha was a sacred ceremony. It represented the union of strength and compassion, power and wisdom. Modern times have forgotten much of this, reducing Omegas to little more than— She paused, choosing her words carefully. Property. But His Majesty remembers the old ways. He will treat you with the respect you deserve. Even though this is an arrangement born of necessity, not choice? Aria asked. You chose to stay, did you not? That makes it more than mere arrangement. A servant entered and whispered something to Lydia, who nodded and turned to Aria. It is time. The king awaits in his private chambers. Aria's heart leaped into her throat. I thought the ceremony was at moonrise. It is, but there are preparations that must be made first, private words that must be exchanged. Come. They walked through the palace as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. The corridors grew quieter, more secluded. Finally, Lydia stopped before an ornate door guarded by 2 imposing beta sentries. Beyond this door are the king's private quarters, Lydia said. I will leave you here. Remember, you are stronger than you know, Aria. Trust in that strength. The guards opened the doors and Aria stepped through. The chamber beyond was vast yet somehow intimate. A fire burned in a great hearth, casting dancing shadows across walls lined with books. Windows looked out over the palace grounds, now painted in the gold and amber of sunset. The furniture was elegant but comfortable, clearly a place where the king actually lived, not just a showpiece for visitors. And there, standing by the window with his back to her, was King Damien. He wore ceremonial robes in deep midnight blue, trimmed with silver. His dark hair was slightly damp, as if he too had recently bathed. When he turned at the sound of the door closing, Aria's breath caught. In the firelight, he looked both human and otherworldly, a man and a legend. You came, he said simply. Did you think I wouldn't? I thought Lydia might convince you of the wisdom of running as far from here as possible. A wry smile touched his lips. She has a talent for brutal honesty. She told me about the curse. About what bonding with you might mean for me. His expression darkened. And yet you're still here. I gave you my word. He studied her for a long moment. Your word. Yes. I am learning that you are someone who takes such things seriously. He moved closer, though he maintained a respectful distance. Before we proceed with the ceremony, I need to know, truly know, that you understand what you're agreeing to. This is not a normal bonding, Aria. I cannot promise you happiness, or even safety. I can only promise that I will do everything in my power to protect you from the curse's worst effects. And I can only promise that I will try, Aria replied. I don't know if I'm the one the prophecy speaks of. I don't know if I'm strong enough, but I know that doing nothing, letting you face this alone, feels wrong in a way I can't explain. Something in his eyes shifted. Surprise, perhaps? Or gratitude? You are remarkable. Do you know that? I'm ordinary, Aria corrected. Just an Omega from a small village who happens to be stubborn. No, he shook his head. I have met many people in my life. Nobles, warriors, advisors, scholars, Few possessed the quiet courage you showed when you agreed to this. That is anything but ordinary. The compliment warmed her, though she didn't quite know how to respond. An awkward silence fell between them, filled only by the crackling of the fire. The ceremony, Aria said finally. What will it involve? The traditional bonding ritual. We will exchange vows before witnesses. There will be a mark. He gestured vaguely to his neck. The Alpha's mark, placed on the Omega to signify the bond. It is permanent. Aria had heard of such things in stories. The mark was more than symbolic. It created an actual connection between Alpha and Omega, allowing them to sense each other's emotions, sometimes even thoughts. It was intimate in a way that went beyond physical. And after the ceremony? You will stay here in chambers adjacent to mine. We will see what happens. If the bond begins to affect the curse, we will know relatively quickly. If not, he didn't finish, but the implication hung between them. Your Majesty, Damien, he interrupted. If we are to be bonded, you should call me by my name, at least in private. Damien, she tested the name, finding it strange on her tongue. What do you expect from me? Beyond the ceremony, I mean. What is my role to be? He considered the question carefully. I expect honesty. I expect you to tell me if the curse begins to affect you. Beyond that? He shrugged slightly. I suppose we will discover together. This is new territory for both of us. A bell tolled somewhere in the palace. Deep, resonant notes that seemed to vibrate through the very stones. Moonrise approaches, Damien said. We should go to the ceremonial hall. Are you ready? Was she? Aria took a deep breath, centering herself the way she used to before facing a difficult task back in Silverpine. She thought of her village, of the people who had raised her, of Elder Yara's belief in her strength. She thought of the king standing before her, powerful yet vulnerable, carrying a burden no one should have to bear alone. I'm ready, she said. The ceremonial hall was smaller than the throne room, but no less impressive. Candles covered every surface, their combined light creating an atmosphere that was both solemn and magical. A select group of witnesses stood along the walls. Lydia, several high-ranking advisors, and a few others Aria didn't recognize. At the center of the room stood an altar of white stone, carved with ancient symbols. A priestess waited there, an elderly beta woman in flowing robes, her eyes kind but knowing. Damien led Aria to the altar. As they approached, she felt the weight of countless eyes upon her, judging, assessing, wondering if she would be the one to save their king or just another failed attempt. The priestess raised her hands, and the murmuring ceased. We gather under the light of the full moon to witness a sacred bond, she intoned. An Alpha and an Omega, brought together by fate and choice, will join their paths. Let all who witness remember that such bonds are not entered lightly, and once made, cannot be easily broken. She turned to Damien. Alpha King, do you accept this Omega as your bonded mate, to protect and cherish, to share your strength and your burdens, for all the days of your life? I do, Damien said, his voice steady and clear. The priestess turned to Aria. Omega, do you accept this Alpha as your bonded mate, to stand beside him, to share his strength and his burdens for all the days of your life? Aria's mouth was dry, but she forced the words out. I do. Then let the mark be given, and the bond be sealed. Damien stepped closer, and Aria's heart raced. This was it, the moment that would change everything. His hand came up to gently tilt her head to the side, exposing her neck. She felt his breath against her skin, warm and steady. This may hurt, he whispered, so quietly only she could hear. I'm sorry. Then his teeth found the junction of her neck and shoulder, and pain flared bright and sharp. Aria bit back a cry, her hands instinctively gripping his arms. But beneath the pain, she felt something else. A rush of warmth, a sense of connection blooming like a flower opening to the sun. The mark was placed. The bond was formed. When Damien pulled back, his eyes had that silver glow she had seen before. But this time it didn't frighten her. She could feel him now, sense his emotions like echoes of her own, his concern for her, his hope, and beneath it all, a terrible darkness that was the curse, writhing and angry at being challenged. The priestess smiled. The bond is sealed. May it bring healing and hope. But as the witnesses began to offer congratulations, Aria felt the first tremor of the curse's influence. It was subtle, a chill that had nothing to do with temperature, a whisper at the edge of her consciousness. She swayed slightly, and Damien's arm immediately steadied her. "I've got you," he murmured. "I've got you." And despite everything, the pain, the fear, the uncertainty, Aria believed him. The celebration following the bonding ceremony was brief and formal. Aria smiled politely as various palace officials offered their congratulations, but she could barely focus on their words. The mark on her neck throbbed with a strange warmth, and through the newly formed bond, she could feel Damien's emotions like whispers in her mind, controlled, careful, but underneath, a current of pain he was fighting to suppress. "You're exhausted," Lydia said quietly, appearing at her side. "The king has asked that you be escorted to your chambers. You'll need rest after the bonding." Aria nodded gratefully. The room had begun to spin slightly, and the voices around her seemed to come from very far away. She looked for Damien and found him across the hall, engaged in conversation with a group of advisors. As if sensing her gaze, he looked up, and their eyes met. Through the bond, she felt his concern spike. Rest, she felt more than heard. "I'll come to you soon." The thought appeared in her mind so clearly it startled her. So this was what a true bond felt like. Not just sensing emotions, but actual communication. Lydia led her through corridors that were becoming familiar, but instead of returning to her original room, they went to a different wing entirely. The chambers they entered were magnificent, a suite of rooms decorated in silver and deep blue, with windows that overlooked the palace gardens. A fire burned in the hearth, and through an open doorway, Aria could see a bedroom with a large canopied bed. "These are your chambers now," Lydia explained. "Adjacent to the king's, as is traditional for bonded mates. There's a connecting door here." She indicated a carved wooden door on the far wall. "The king can access your rooms through it, but it locks from your side. You maintain your privacy and autonomy." "Thank you," Aria said, touching the mark on her neck unconsciously. It had stopped hurting, but she could still feel it. A constant reminder of the bond. "How do you feel?" Lydia asked, studying her carefully. "Strange. Connected. Like there's someone else in my head, but not in an intrusive way. And," she hesitated, "I can feel something dark at the edges." "The curse?" Lydia nodded gravely. "The curse will try to test the bond, to find weaknesses. You must be strong, Aria. The next few days will be critical. The full moon is tomorrow night, and that's when the curse is always at its strongest. What should I expect? Pain, possibly. Visions. The curse may try to turn you against the king, to break the bond before it can solidify. It feeds on fear and doubt." Lydia placed a hand on her shoulder. "But you are not alone in this. The king will fight it from his side, and you must fight from yours. And I, along with others loyal to His Majesty, will do everything we can to support you both." After Lydia left, Aria explored her new chambers. They were more luxurious than anything she had ever imagined. Thick carpets, elegant furniture, shelves lined with books. A wardrobe held gowns in various styles and colors, all tailored to her size. On the bedside table, she found a note in elegant script. "These chambers belong to my mother, the late queen. She would have liked you, I think. You have her strength. D." The words touched something deep in Aria's chest. She had never known her own mother. She had died when Aria was too young to remember. To think that she now occupied rooms that once belonged to a queen felt surreal. She changed into a sleeping gown that had been laid out, soft silk that felt like water against her skin, and settled into a chair by the fire. She should sleep, she knew, but her mind was too active, too full of everything that had happened. Through the bond, she could feel Damien. He was still awake, still dealing with palace business despite the late hour. His emotions were controlled, but she could sense the strain beneath his calm exterior. How long had he carried this burden alone? How many nights had he fought the curse while maintaining the appearance of strength for his kingdom? Without thinking, she sent a thought toward him. "You should rest, too." The response came immediately, tinged with surprise and something that might have been warmth. "I could say the same to you. I tried. Too much in my head. Welcome to my world." A pause then. "May I come to you? There are things we should discuss." Aria's heart quickened, but she answered, yes. Moments later, she heard the click of the connecting door. Damien entered, no longer in his ceremonial robes but in simpler clothes, a loose shirt and dark trousers. He looked more human this way, less like the untouchable king, and more like a man burdened by impossible circumstances. You should be sleeping, he said, though his tone was gentle rather than reproving. So should you, Aria countered. A slight smile touched his lips. Fair enough. He gestured to the chair opposite hers. May I? These are my chambers, apparently. I should be asking your permission. These are your chambers, he confirmed, settling into the chair. In every way that matters, Aria. You are not a prisoner here. You are my bonded mate, which in the eyes of the kingdom makes you queen. You have autonomy, authority, and the right to refuse me anything, including my presence if you wish it. The statement surprised her. I thought, in bondings like this, the Omega was expected to submit to the Alpha's will. Perhaps in other bonds. Not in ours. His amber eyes met hers steadily. I told you before. This bond was formed through choice, not coercion. I will not betray that by treating you as anything less than my equal. Aria studied him, this powerful Alpha who spoke of equality with an Omega. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? Someone crueler, harder. The stories about you are mostly true, he finished. I have made difficult decisions. I have been harsh when necessary. The throne demands strength, and I have provided it. But that doesn't mean I lack compassion, or that I view those beneath my station as lesser beings. He leaned forward slightly. My mother taught me that true strength lies not in domination, but in protection, in using power to shelter those who cannot shelter themselves. She sounds remarkable. She was. Sadness flickered across his face. She died when I was 17. The curse had begun affecting my father by then, and the strain of watching him deteriorate. It broke her heart. Literally. The healers said it was a weakness in her heart, but I knew the truth. She loved him so much that watching him suffer killed her. I'm sorry, Aria said softly. They sat in silence for a moment, the fire crackling between them. Through the bond, Aria could feel his grief, old and worn smooth by time, but still present. You feel it, don't you? Damien asked. The curse, at the edges of your awareness. Yes, it's like a shadow that's watching, waiting. It will try to corrupt the bond, to turn us against each other. You must remember, no matter what you see or feel in the coming days, it is the curse speaking, not truth. What will I see? He stood and moved to the window, looking out at the moonlit gardens. That depends. The curse is different for everyone it touches. For me, it manifests as physical pain and loss of control over my wolf form. For you, it might be different. Visions, perhaps. Nightmares. It will search for your deepest fears and use them against you. Aria rose and joined him at the window. And if the bond isn't strong enough, if I'm not the one the prophecy spoke of, then we will both suffer. But I will bear the worst of it. The curse will consume me eventually. And you will be released from the bond before it can destroy you. He turned to face her. I have made arrangements. If I fall, you will be protected, provided for. You can return to your village or go wherever you wish. You will not be abandoned. You've thought of everything. I've had a long time to prepare for failure. The resignation in his voice sparked something in Aria. Anger, perhaps, or determination. Then maybe it's time you prepared for success instead. He looked at her with surprise. You have remarkable faith for someone who has known me less than a day. I have faith in the bond. I can feel it, Damien. It's real. It's strong. Whatever this curse is, we can fight it together. You say that now. But when the curse truly shows itself, then I'll still be here, Aria interrupted. I didn't agree to this bond thinking it would be easy. I agreed because it was right. Because you needed help and I could provide it. That doesn't change when things get difficult. For a long moment, he simply stared at her. Then, slowly, he reached out and took her hand. His skin was warm, his grip gentle but firm. You're my only salvation, he said quietly, and the words carried the weight of absolute truth. I didn't believe it when the prophecy was first revealed. I thought it was just desperate hope, a fairy tale told to dying kings. But now, with you here, With this bond between us, I believe, for the first time in years, I actually believe I might survive this. The vulnerability in his voice, in his eyes, broke something open in Aria's chest. This wasn't the fearsome Alpha King speaking. This was just Damien, a man who had carried an impossible burden for too long, who had faced his mortality and made peace with it, only to find hope in the most unexpected place. "Then let's make sure you do," she said. He raised her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "Thank you, Aria, for your courage, for your strength, for choosing to stand with me when you could have run." "Where would I run to?" she asked with a small smile. "Silverpine? They'd never let me live down the fact that I turned down a king." The joke was gentle, but it had the desired effect. Some of the heaviness lifted from Damien's expression, and he almost smiled. "Fair point. I imagine the story would grow with each telling. Did you hear about Aria who rejected the Alpha King and lived to tell the tale? She was clearly mad, they'd say. Must have been the stress of the selection." They shared a moment of lighter connection, and Aria marveled at how natural it felt. The bond between them was growing stronger with each passing moment, each shared word and glance. She could feel it like a living thing, weaving their souls together. But beneath that growing warmth, the darkness stirred. Aria gasped as pain lanced through her head, sharp and sudden. Through the bond, she felt Damien's alarm spike. "Aria, what's wrong?" "I don't know, The room spun. For a moment, she wasn't in her chambers anymore. She was somewhere else. A dark forest. Trees twisted and gnarled, their branches reaching like skeletal fingers. A figure stood in the shadows, watching her. When it stepped forward, Aria saw it wore Damien's face, but the eyes were wrong, empty and cold, filled with malice. "Did you really think you could save him?" the figure asked, its voice a mockery of Damien's. "You're nothing, an omega from nowhere. You'll break just like the others." "No," Aria whispered. "Yes, and when you break, he'll fall. Because of you, because you weren't strong enough." "Aria!" Damien's real voice cut through the vision, and suddenly she was back in her chambers, his hands on her shoulders, his face close to hers. "Aria, look at me. Focus on my voice. It's not real. Whatever you saw, it's the curse. It's not real." She blinked, her vision clearing. Damien's eyes, the real Damien's eyes, looked at her with concern and understanding. Nothing like the emptiness she had seen in the vision. "I saw you," she managed. "But it wasn't you. It said I would fail. The curse lies. That's what it does. It finds your fears and gives them form." He helped her to sit, kneeling beside her chair. "What else did it show you?" "A dark forest. A voice saying I would break, that I wasn't strong enough." Damien's jaw tightened. "It's testing you already." "The bond must be stronger than I thought for the curse to react this quickly. Is that good or bad?" "Both. It means we have a real chance at breaking it. But it also means the curse will fight harder to prevent that." Aria took a shaky breath, pressing her hand against her chest where her heart hammered. "How do you live with this? These visions? This darkness?" "I've had years to build defenses. You've had hours. But you're already doing better than you know." He stood and moved to a cabinet, pouring water from a pitcher into a glass. "Drink this. It will help." The water was cool and sweet, with a faint herbal taste. As she drank, Aria felt the lingering effects of the vision fade, though the memory remained sharp. "The others," she said suddenly, "the Omegas who came before me, did they experience visions like this?" Damien's expression darkened. "Yes. Some couldn't handle it. They broke within days, and we had to sever the bonds before the curse could consume them. Others lasted longer, but eventually, the visions became too much. They begged to leave. But you said they were unharmed. Physically, yes. Mentally, the curse leaves scars, even on those who escape it. I carry the guilt of that." He set the glass aside and returned to his chair. "That's why I wanted you to know everything before the ceremony. Why I gave you the choice to refuse. I will not have another person suffering on my conscience if I can prevent it." "You can't prevent it," Aria said quietly. "Not if you want to break the curse. Someone has to take the risk, and I'd rather it be me, knowing what I'm facing, than you facing it alone." "Why?" The question burst from him, raw and genuine. Why would you accept such risk for someone you barely know? Aria considered the question carefully. Why had she agreed? It would be easy to say it was duty, or fear of the consequences of refusal, or even just curiosity about the palace and the king. But those weren't the real reasons. Because when I looked into your eyes in the throne room, I saw someone who had forgotten what hope felt like. Someone who had accepted their fate but hadn't given up fighting. And I thought, if I could give that person even a chance at freedom, how could I say no? She met his gaze steadily. Besides, I know what it's like to carry burdens alone. I've done it most of my life. It's exhausting. If I can share yours, even a little, then this bond serves a purpose beyond just breaking a curse. Damien stood abruptly and turned away, but not before Aria saw the emotion flash across his face. Gratitude, wonder, and something that looked almost like pain. I don't deserve you, he said, his voice rough. That's not for you to decide. He laughed, but it sounded suspiciously like he was fighting tears. My mother would have loved you. She always said that the strongest wolves were the ones who chose compassion over cruelty, connection over isolation. He turned back to face her. I lost sight of that after she died. Became harder, more closed off. I told myself it was necessary for ruling, for surviving the curse. But maybe I was just afraid. Afraid of what? Of letting anyone close enough to lose them. Of caring about someone and watching the curse destroy them because of me. He ran a hand through his hair. The other Omegas, I kept them at a distance emotionally. I thought it would be easier that way, if the bonds failed. But with you— With me? Aria prompted when he trailed off. With you, I find myself wanting to trust. Wanting to believe this might actually work. And that terrifies me more than the curse ever has. Aria stood and crossed to him, driven by an instinct she didn't fully understand. She reached out and took his hand again, feeling the bond pulse between them. Warm, strong, real. Then we'll be terrified together, she said. But we won't be alone. That has to count for something. His fingers tightened around hers. You have no idea how much it counts. They stood there in the firelight, hands clasped, the bond between them strengthening with each passing moment. Aria could feel his emotions more clearly now. The fear, yes, but also determination, gratitude, and beneath it all, a growing sense of hope that he was afraid to acknowledge fully. You should rest, he said finally, though he made no move to leave. Tomorrow will be difficult. The curse always intensifies as the full moon approaches. Will you be all right? Tonight, I mean? I have ways of managing the pain, and knowing you're here, close by, he gestured to the connecting door. It helps. The bond provides some relief. Then use it, Aria said. Don't try to shield me from everything. Let me help carry the burden. That's what bonds are for, isn't it? He looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. You are remarkable, Aria Moonwhisper. I hope you never forget that. I'm just stubborn, she corrected. There's a difference. No, he said firmly. There really isn't. He raised her hand once more, this time pressing his forehead against her knuckles, a gesture of respect and gratitude that made her breath catch. Then, reluctantly, he released her. Sleep well, he said. And if the visions return, reach for me through the bond. I'll be there. The same goes for you, she replied. He nodded and moved toward the connecting door. Just before he reached it, he paused and looked back. Aria? Yes? Thank you. For everything. For being here. For being you. Then he was gone, the door closing softly behind him. Aria stood alone in her chambers, her hand still tingling where he had kissed it. Through the bond, she could feel him on the other side of the wall, not intruding, but present. A reminder that she wasn't alone anymore. She moved to the bed and slipped beneath the covers. They were soft and warm, scented faintly with lavender. As she settled in, she reached out tentatively through the bond, sending a simple thought. Good night, Damien. The response came wrapped in warmth. Good night, my queen. My queen. The words should have felt strange, overwhelming. Instead, they felt right. Aria closed her eyes and let sleep claim her, the bond humming softly in the back of her mind like a lullaby. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new tests from the curse. But tonight, she had made a connection, real and true, with someone who needed it as desperately as she did. Whatever came next, they would face it together. And somehow that made all the difference.